So you've got a great game idea and you get, I don't know, 3 other friends together and you're just going to start making a game, right? And you've been busy all night coding and you get the basic mechanics in, but your artists have decided that they're going to sculpt a main character that looks nothing like the character that you spoke to them about. And meanwhile, your animator has nothing to do, so they're putting pressure on you to get something through the pipeline. And then you call your third friend, who's another programmer, and you discover that all the mechanics that you were working on over the night, they already implemented it and it's in engine already. So you've wasted that time, and then you realize that you've got an even better idea that you should have done from the start, and that will make it an even better game. The deadline is in 2 weeks. How do you fix this? And that's kind of why I guess we're all here. Let me see if I can move my slides across. So hello, I'm Mel Phillips and I'm head of studio at Silver Rain Games, which is a brand new remote working studio. We did all of this before it was fashionable, that launched in March 2020, just as we went into the first lockdown in the UK. So I work very closely with my friend and business partner, Abu Bakr Salim, who is also our creative director for the game we're making. And making games, it's meant to be fun. And for a lot of the past year, it has been. But anyone who has made anything will also know that it's exhausting and stressful and frustrating. And we've had some really hard learnings over this last year. It's literally a year to the day that I started working at the studio. So I wanted to focus today on some of the learnings that we've had and tips to implement and manage on your workload pipeline when working as a team. And something actually that Steve just mentioned was the idea of when you get past a certain number of people in a studio, the game changes, like everything changes, all the things that you thought that you knew, it's no longer the same. We've had at least 5 rounds, I think, where the studio changed, and we call it a hardening. It's like a hardening process. Is it not showing my slides? Sorry. Oh, no,
It is, yeah, sorry.
Good. I've seen the chat coming up. But we had a hardening process. It's happened about 5 times. And we started off as a sort of group of, well, me and Abu right at the beginning, and then a group of sort of 3, then 5. And now we're closer to 30. And every time that hardening happens, we grow a little bit. We have a sort of bit of a freak out, and then we figure out how the new pipeline works. And that's quite normal. So that's kind of the learnings that we've had. And so the pipeline is, of course, how do I get the idea I've had into a working, playable thing? And it's something that will obviously be unique to every studio, depending on how many on your team. And it's also something that will bend and flex depending on what it is that is going through the pipeline, what you're making at certain times as well. And there'll be times where everything is seemingly working fluidly and everyone's on the same page, but there's also going to be times where it feels like a struggle. And you might have to make a decision that is difficult and go against what somebody wants. And this is one of my major learnings over the last year. We joke at the studio that a lot of my job is just to say no to everything. That's not too far from the truth. My purpose in this relationship is to locate and identify and sort out anything that threatens to cause chaos. And that's not just to the project, but also to the company in general. And saying no to stuff can be really difficult, especially when people around you are excited about something and they really want you to say yes. But it's also the difference between being able to make something or just talking about making the something. I see a lot of projects start and quickly turn sour. This is not just at like university levels, but at sort of, actual game studio levels. And it could have been saved if people had been able to communicate their concerns earlier on. Communication is absolutely everything. We had a lot of trouble at the start when we set up the studio, where our prototyping of new ideas was not really fully formed or structured in a way that it could be easily tested. And then new ideas would come in and they would threaten to disrupt what we'd already built. There was a number of times where we had to change direction. I mean, we changed engine. There's a lot of learning in there. So please heed my warnings. And nobody likes the person that always says no. So when you're looking at your own studio management, there's a lot of things that you can do to put in place that will avoid you being the one that has to say no all the time. So let's have a look at this. So firstly, encourage your team to think through ideas before presenting them. And this seems an obvious thing to do, but it's something that we really have to work on as a team, especially if they're going to have any major changes on the game, like a new mechanic. And it's amazing how many times somebody has this great idea at 3 a.m. in the morning and they immediately want to email and get everybody involved and try and implement it. And I can guarantee that no matter how good you think your 3 a.m. idea is, you will never present it well enough within the next 6 hours to the team that it should go through. So we have had to put in processes where it's like, think about that, sit on that, create a little document. But anything that gives more time to consider, so that when that person presents that idea, we're all human, and very often our latest idea is the best idea we've ever had. And on reflection, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Sometimes that idea wasn't the best, but at the time it can feel so strong. So we try to encourage the team to consider and sleep on ideas before they present them directly. Secondly, create a structure so that ideas can be discussed before they have any effect on the pipeline. We now have a regular leads meeting set up within our studio, so the team leads all meet and discuss new ideas or flag any concerns, any risks that are coming up in their team. And we also have a weekly team meeting, which I've just come from actually, where each of the team shows off their main wins for the week. And this kind of keeps the rest of the team involved in what's happening in other areas, so that people can be aware of how their decisions might affect others. And then finally, exactly what Steve was just going through, which is produce a system that assesses, calculates, and estimates the costs of ideas. How long does it take to work an idea through your pipeline? When we first started, this is definitely a trial and error thing, and we're getting pretty good at it now. It's our technical art director, Jody Azhar, who created a spreadsheet, and it literally calculates the pipeline time from concept art to a thing appearing animated in Engine. And this has helped us see what's within scope for the project as well. But sometimes, though, you have to say no to a good idea, even if you don't want to. And here are my tips for that. So ask the person to take responsibility for their idea, both in presenting the pros and cons to your project lead. Prioritize and ask what priority the new idea needs to be considered if it was to go forwards. Is this something that can be changed immediately, or can it be added as a stretch goal? Stretch goal, by the way, is one of my favorite things to put things into. It's where there's so many good ideas and we just put them in stretch goal. We also keep all of our ideas, even if they're not suitable for the project, we keep them somewhere else as well. So there's like a sort of vault where we keep everything. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Question the impact that the new idea may have on other areas of the project. So again, listening to your team leads from other areas. I am by no means an expert in programming. I need to rely on my programming team to feedback whether this is a good idea or not. It shouldn't just be left down to me to decide. Show your costings, working out against your timeline. Does implementing the idea mean you physically can't ever finish the project on time, or does something need to go and be removed? And then finally, remain open about concerns and be clear that whilst it is a good idea, there are a number of reasons why it can't be implemented at this time. And I always try to avoid bringing in any of my own bias here, reviewing the idea in regards to the overall health of the project. And here's the kicker that nobody ever wants to hear. Everyone is creative and everyone can have ideas. So every single person in the universe could come up with a game idea. It may not be a good one, but they'll give you an idea. Ideas can also be presented in the form of opinions, like it would be great if you could do this, or feedback, I wish you could, or this character would be cooler if. And guess what? It's super easy for me to play your game and tell you how to make it better. It's super easy. Like, it will take me 3 minutes and I'll tell you something massive and then I'll move on with my life. And you're left to figure out whether that was a good or bad idea and how on earth you should implement it. We put a lot of weight onto good ideas, and I get asked a lot, like, how do I be the person that comes up with an idea and everyone else just makes it? But that job doesn't exist at all. The whole team have ideas and will work together to evaluate which ones can go forwards or not. So understanding that everyone has ideas and that it's okay to evaluate them and say no to some of these is actually a really healthy attitude to set within before you even begin to make a game. Structuring and assessing these ideas into your workflow will ultimately help people feel heard and keep your team open and excited about the project that you're working on. But do remember that ideas are cheap, and the real work is when you have to actually start making them. And this brings me on to one of my massive learnings of the past year. I think I already knew this, but the last year has really solidified this learning, that people are one of the biggest challenges when running a game studio. They are the best and worst part of my job, as getting that right balance, creating the right culture can make or break us. And it doesn't matter how well you've structured your pipeline or how good your game idea is or how much you prepared for it, people are weird. And this isn't a dig at any of my colleagues at Silverane. I love them very, very deeply. This is all people everywhere, anyone and everyone who you will ever interact with, including yourself. I'm super weird, will have the capacity to be weird or act in some weird way that you weren't expecting. And this is, by the way, and I can't stress this enough, perfectly normal. You can have the perfect business plan, clearest production pipeline, but if you're not on board with your people, then none of that matters. Step one, you have to decide who you're making your game with. Abu and I are friends and have been for a long time, but it doesn't make working together any easier. In fact, it has a lot of potential to create power relations that are really confusing to the entire production. So we have to be really open with each other about how we feel or any concerns that we have. And also, be aware that we're not always going to agree on stuff and have, an idea of how we're going to deal with that when we come to that problem where we don't agree. And I'm a firm believer that people don't usually wake up in the morning and go, how can I be the worst person possible today and do the most destruction? That most people deep down really want to be good at their job and appreciated for their time and effort. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm up against issues that might feel challenging. But people are weird, and that's okay. A lot about building a team is embracing other people's weirdnesses and finding what motivates them and how we're all going to work ultimately together for a long period of time on a thing. And similarly, people don't always get on, but I think so long as you've created a space where it can be acknowledged that, people don't always get on, that can be expressed and explored and worked through. And sometimes it can't be worked on and people get really angry, or they might even leave a project, and that is okay too. This is something that we don't talk about enough in managing pipelines is, what if it just doesn't work and people leave? Everyone is entitled to their own feelings and to move away if a project doesn't ultimately serve them. And that's been a really hard learning, I think, for me to sit with over the last year, because at first it can feel hugely personal, but you also have to step back and acknowledge that people are allowed to disagree and make their own decisions. And then before I wrap up, I just wanted to quickly share some things that I found really work for our studio on a wider basis in regards to pipeline management. And that's especially having to work remotely, and we work across, I think, 4 different time zones at the moment as well. So it feels like we just continually 24-hour game dev. So these are adapt and flex, and that can apply to absolutely everything. Regular drop-ins, this is something that we do between line managers. We do 2 stand-ups a day as well because of the different time zones. And just providing a lot of feedback and communication where people can drop in and they know I will be available twice a day at this spot, and they can come and find me and tell me if they need anything. Team meetings, weekly team meetings to celebrate the wins. Communications, always improving. What can we do better? How do we make this faster? What needs to change to move forwards? Checking direction as well, making sure that all of your team leads and direction is all on the same sort of motivation level. I said before previously in a talk that if I'm looking for growth, but Abu is looking for stability, then we are going to be constantly at loggerheads as well as studio managers. And we will prioritize opportunities differently. We'll prioritize who we hire, how we talk about the studio. And if we're constantly at loggerheads there, it's never going to work. And that's going to filter down into the pipeline itself. People are incredibly sensitive, and just humans that work together pick up on these things. So it's really important that the direction is very focused. Clear responsibilities, making people feel like they can be proud and own part of their job. Risk assessment, something that we do on a regular basis. What's risky? And we talk about it in our leads meeting every week and go through each of the individual teams. Be honest about what's happening. We record all of our meeting in note form, so that if people can't get to a certain meeting or they're just curious as to what was going on in that meeting, they can have a little look. Regular feedback sessions, so review sessions to check on well-being and discuss future goals and motivations. And finally, admit when you're wrong. Sometimes we try something and it doesn't work. And again, that's okay. We just have to figure out what does. And that brings me to my end. Thank you.